And we have speaking with us tonight, Anthony Simpson, who has kindly agreed to talk about his journey up until now, Anthony, and what it's like to be in construction and how that relates to law, I guess.
Yep.
Before we start, I might just do an acknowledgement of country. So I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country in which we meet. That's the Jayabal and Garawa people. Okay, Anthony, I think probably it's best if you tell us how you came to be where you are in your career at the moment.
Sure, and I'll apologise for living under a flight path if I have to mute, because we're battling Brisbane Airport. So who am I? Come back to study. It's a bit of a midlife crisis, having spent a lot of 20 years in construction and engineering. 20 years ago, just to be different, I studied psychology and then didn't want to do that, so wound up in civil construction. I spent 20 years as a construction estimator, project planner, business development, business strategy, what else? Risk management, contract administration, project management, all of it. It all just kind of rolls into one over time. I am now, well, at one point I was also a business owner. I set up and ran a engineering consultancy for 10 years and very fortuitously sold that business just prior to COVID and went back freelancing. So I am now the principal consultant for our very wittily named company, the Engineering and Design Company, because that's exactly what we do. I'm also now an accredited mediator thanks to USQ, and so anybody who's interested in mediation is something a little bit different and alternate dispute resolution, by all means look into that. Linda Kachansky ran a really good course at USQ and it made it really easy. So challenging, you get to put yourself out there, but for everything that we do and we intend to do with the law, I think it's really handy to have an appreciation for not just that adversarial approach. So what do I do now? Look, I work predominantly with contractors across Australia, contractors of all sizes, predominantly in civil construction, although quite a bit of defence work, electrical and building works. Look, I work with contractors in far north Queensland who are, family businesses and turning over a couple of $1 million a year to all the way through to tier one contractors who are bidding on multi-billion-dollar contracts. My role has typically been in the project planning and just the early stages. So I found a really comfortable home with construction estimating in what's called pre-contracts, which is all the fun stuff for people with short attention spans like myself, where we get to get involved in bidding projects, the tender stage, and really doing very, very rapid engineering to come up with solutions that have, that are commercially competitive. That way I don't have to spend years on a project and get burnt out and do the FIFO work. It's good to just get in and spend 12 to 20 weeks on a major bid, and then be out the door and hopefully we've won something. So that's what I do now. I consult in pre-contracts. Contractors come to me and ask to help them with their business strategy, with bid management, and then the nuts and bolts, putting together numbers and developing budgets for projects and strategies for winning bids. Now I'm studying law, so
almost
how did
completed.
I get there? Almost completed, 4 weeks to go. So how did I get there? Well, I guess when I sold business. I was looking at, what am I going to do with all this free time now that I'm not managing people and changing passwords and updating websites and doing bookkeeping and all those kind of fun things. Kids were getting to that stage where they're a little bit more self-reliant. They're 14 and 11 now, but they put up with me and my grumpiness for the last 4 years. I always wanted to go back and study, and the obvious thing would have been to go back and get an engineering degree, but I just I looked around and just felt I wasn't right. So I remember enjoying legal studies in high school many years ago, and thought, yeah, look, I'll give it a go. I'm interested. So for me, coming to study law was a bit of a challenge, but also to keep my brain stimulated. And I just had an open door mentality. We'll see what it's like, and if I like it, great. If not, what have I got to lose? USQ had really good flexible online delivery, which prior to COVID was appealing, but during COVID was essential. So really appreciated how we've managed to keep studying through all of this and do it at a time that suits me as well. So I spent the last 3.5 years, yes, spending a lot of late nights and working full time, consulting all over the place, and then trying to smash out a law degree at close to a full-time pace at night. Yeah, so that's where I am now. I've enjoyed the last 3.5 years. Not sure where it's going to take me. I've also just put my hand up to do a couple of days a week. I work as a law clerk with Piper Alderman here in Brisbane in a new construction and projects practice with Karen Reardon, who's a very well respected partner in construction law. And I sought her out and just reached out and said, look, I'd love to come and work with you and learn from you. And she didn't just brush me off. She said, well, it's great timing, building a new practice here. So I've jumped straight into that and seeing what it's like inside a reasonably large, they're a tier 2 firm, but it's pretty cool to see what it all looks like on the other side.
Do they ask you much for your expertise? Because
yes, in strange ways. I guess there's a lot of gossip because I'm still connected to the industry, so it's always handy to know which contractors are doing what and what government departments are considering what are the big projects and the big pain points in the industry. But even on some smaller matters with contractors and technical things, might come down to I had to do an impromptu engineering course around reinforcing steel for a couple of the other clerks the other day, just looking at some matters that are in dispute and what the hell do these things do and what does this mean? And I'm like, oh, relax, it's just concrete. So that comes in handy.
Yeah. So how long are you going to do that for, Anthony?
Oh, look, I thought I'd get in there early and just do a couple of days a week so it'd fit neatly around my other obligations, consulting obligations. And it also kind of ticks off that box before I go and do my PLT. So I'm intending to start that in July and get that done as quickly as possible. But, it's just good to get that exposure early anyway, rather than I had the opportunity, so why wait till after the degree's locked down and just get it done and see if I like it more than anything else. And
do you like it? You must.
Yeah, look, I do. I think Karen would say I'm far too bloody slow and I talk too much and I write too much. But that's just what you get after 20 years of working with engineers. You do have to talk too much and write too much to get your point across. And I know that all comes with practice, and it's entirely different to what I've been doing. So I'd get there, but I don't really see myself being a lawyer. I think my home is always going to be in construction, but law works really well with construction. It's one of the most litigious industries that you could think of outside of, family law. So there's always a need for good legal minds in construction, particularly people who are commercially astute and understand the business aspect of things, but also the people side of things. And I think that's where good lawyers are capable of mixing the two, that you can, read the rule of law and, read a contract as it's written, but you can also appreciate the interests of people on both sides of an argument and try to find a reasonable approach to problem solving rather than just enforcing contractual rights,
Which is where your mediation now will come in as well.
That's exactly it. So kind of harking back to studying psychology and taking the time to understand behaviour and thinking that I have some emotional intelligence, but understanding that others might, even if I don't. But but you've got to be honest, and that's what it does. It teaches you to be self-reflective, and to an extent, you have to be self-reflective. Well, that's what we're taught we have to anyway when we're studying law, is to stop and think about it and maybe try to look at problems on more than one level. So yeah, look, I think ADR certainly has a home in construction, because it's really easy for matters to just to get out of hand, and for parties to retreat to their corners and never want to come to the middle of the ring. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to use those mediation skills in commercial disputes, and specifically around construction disputes, because there's too many contractors that have been burnt from disputes that I think could have been resolved much more amicably and reasonably. So I'd love a return to relationship contracting like we always talk about we had in the good old days.
So it did used to happen?
To an extent, yeah. I think certainly in the civil construction industry and infrastructure, the landscape has changed significantly over the last 20 years. Much larger contractors and international contractors have come in. The jobs keep getting bigger. We're always talking about mega projects, and mega projects are going over budget and going wrong. You're talking about $1 billion payouts to manage contractors on the light rail projects.
Wow.
Being handled horrendously, but government having to basically compensate for poor planning and poor risk management. So there's a lot of challenges in construction. It's just immense. So there's always a place where, like I said, good legal minds can find a home and do their best to wade through all the crap and get better outcomes for the industry.
But do you think you need that construction background?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, like I said, I think people with good emotional intelligence and commercial intelligence, they can find a nice home there. So if you wrap your head around some basics of contract, and you can appreciate that those commercial relationships are based on contractual documents, but also relationships between people, that kind of underpins construction, because effectively it's contracting. It's in the name, contracting. It's two parties coming together, one to pay the other for construction services. How you get there is a matter for the document, but also how you work together to achieve the objectives of a particular project are important. And that's what I think probably started happening before the oil and gas boom on the East Coast, the gas boom in particular. It just started to get more adversarial. Matthew can speak from experience around EPC contracting, where you have big multinational, effectively consultants and project management teams come in with no love or care for their contractors. They get their fee for delivering a project for an owner that just wants to spend the money and have an asset at the end of the day. They don't really care about what happens in the middle. So there was a real separation of parties from one another, and there was no relationship in the middle to bind people in common for the desired outcome. And there was no real motivation to collaborate, which is a bit of a horrible buzzword in industry at the moment, but it's true that spirit of cooperation and collaboration is sorely missing. We'll talk about collaboration, but whether or not it exists in practicality is another point altogether.
But if it's not even coming from the top, so the owners don't even care about collaboration, how does it happen? Because, I mean, when it comes down to someone like you who is there and could mediate with people, but do you just get like told not to even try or not to bother?
I mean, yeah. But I think it's the pressures that the industry is under at the moment, severely short of resources. Everybody's heard of the price of construction materials just growing exponentially, and it's true. We've had projects that we bid on 12 months ago. Really good example locally, a bid on a project 12 months ago, it cost 55 million. They shelved it, didn't have the money because of COVID, put it back out to tender in February this year, and they were shocked when the price came back at 78 million.
Wow.
So those are real quantifiable changes in the supply chain. There's just not enough people to do everything. So all these things introduce risks. Projects become more complex, they become bigger. Generally, the bigger a project, the more moving parts it's got, so the more complexity you've got to manage. So there's always unknowns, there's always risks that somebody hasn't thought about or hasn't bothered to think about. So what they try to do is pass that risk off to somebody else. You sweep it on the carpet, they don't have to deal with it. That other party then who's left holding a basket of unknown risks, they're the ones on the wrong side of the contract. So they start losing money. The program starts slipping, and then they're in trouble, and they have to turn around to the owner or the other party and say, hey, look, we need to try to recover something here. We're really hurting. And the old form would be, well, we've got a contract. That's up to you. You can't afford to do that in the current climate. Most government departments are slowly coming to the party and saying, we understand that, we can't deliver all this infrastructure without these contractors. We need to contract properly. We need to engage with contractors and be fair and reasonable and properly start looking at risk and properly proportioning risk. The government is becoming a little bit more proactive in that respect. Where I see lawyers and potential lawyers being able to play a part there is really working with, I'd probably call it risk identification, risk management, and offering good advice and trying to be proactively pushing for relationship contracting, identifying aspects of contracts perhaps that aren't fair and reasonable, and maybe could be a bit more balanced in the interests of delivering projects properly. So I'm always pushing for that. I do contract reviews for every tender that that gets sent to me to be part of. And the first thing I'll do is look at the contract and say, what's unusual about this? Where's the risk sitting? Is it with the principal, or is the contractor going to wear all of it, or a significant portion of it? And then looking at the project as well and saying, okay, what's weird about this? Is it an easy project, or what's likely to go wrong here? And then trying to encourage early conversations around that with the principal and say, look, if you're not aware of this, these are the things that could go wrong. Can we find a reasonable position here that works for both parties? Otherwise, somebody's either going to be paying for it up front or paying for it in the long run. Sometimes, they won't be receptive to that. I'll just say, tough shit. You deal with it, and we'll pay for it. So, somebody ends up paying for it. In a lot of cases, that's the taxpayer, because then projects go over budget really quickly.
I'll just see if Matthew wants to ask a question, Anthony, before we go any further. Are you there, Matthew?
So, Anthony, what should USQ students do to prepare if they're interested in pursuing a career in the construction industry?
Study construction law. Look, for anybody that's listening, Matthew and I went through the construction law elective together. It was last year, wasn't it, Matthew? I think it was, yeah. With Julie, and it was good fun. Probably a little bit of a cheat, having spent so much time in construction, and a lot of the concepts were already quite familiar to me. But as I said before, it's contracting. So if you understand that, then the rest of it comes fairly naturally. But you shouldn't be put off by the fact that it's tailored towards construction, because it does affect. It just comes into so many things in your life. If you're going to build your first home, you're going to be much better prepared for understanding the ins and outs. And it has overlaps with insurance, tax. What else? Procurement is always interesting. Torts. There's always issues bordering on negligence and liability for negligence with defective construction. So it cuts across a lot of different things. It might say construction law on the course guide, but I'd recommend it to anybody just to give it a go.
Sometimes I wish we could take more electives, because I just like to get a taste of what's out there. But unfortunately, I've nearly used up all mine. What other subjects did you enjoy, Anthony?
Yeah, so the ADR subjects were good, as I said. Just trying to think back, what else have they done? I have to look at my textbooks because I've forgotten. I think what I've enjoyed the most is just the broad brush approach we get just studying through the course, and just getting to have a look at things that you go, I've probably got no interest in that. I'm thinking international law, it's just over my head, and then, geez, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I wish I could do something with that, and I know that's going to take me down the wrong, or just so far away from where I think I'm going to be. Bizarrely, I was never a fan of criminal law, but loved evidence. And
I think you're the only person I've heard say that.
Because I can see some practical uses, right? And thinking about litigation and construction, of course, and how you might actually pay attention to evidence and the usefulness of that in litigation. I did, which one was that? What was that called? I forgot. Administrative law I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. it just spoke to me, and I could see probably I don't know, I could never really wrap my head around human rights law, but I could see administrative law being the more engineering side of that, you know, more structured. Here are the rules.
Yeah.
This thing is wrong, and this gives you the platform to challenge that. Environmental law was hard work, very hard work. It's a lot broader than people expect, but I did enjoy it.
When you say broader, what do you mean for environmental law?
It was hard work. It's there's a lot to consider, a lot in the legislation, and yeah, you just have to be on top of it. There's just a lot of moving parts in that.
But that in some ways that would have some overlap with construction law too. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And I took some of that out of environmental law, and you know, planning for it's a copper mine. You know, that Mount Isa are insisting the Canadian miners to understand some of their obligations around approval, because they wanted to put in a construction camp out there. So they were woefully unprepared for Australia's regulatory system, and probably not getting the right advice from their engineering advisors as well. They were thinking they were going to have this particular mining operation up and running inside 12 months. No, just no.
So they don't have a similar, it's not as strict in Canada.
I'm sure they do, just don't think that they're fully appreciative of.
So Francine's question, basically, yes, it's not as strict. And it's very different. Northern America is very different approach than Australia. But I wanted to bring back to what Anthony said about ADR, and the mediation course was really good to bring out those skills of being able to communicate and understand people's interests and what they're striving to accomplish. And the other part of that is in construction law, many disputes are settled through arbitration or adjudication, which are forms of ADR. And so I think Anthony probably really liked evidence. I'm just guessing, because although the rules of evidence work differently in those tribunals, evidence is very important, especially expert evidence. So that's a very good understanding to have if you're going to construction law, in my opinion.
Definitely, and yeah, if you're going down that path as well, you do really well to pay attention to civil procedure and anything to do with legal writing, because being able to draft a good claim, a statement of claim, is fundamental to that as well. So that whole process and that hierarchy thinking is incredibly handy. Just the logical approach to problem solving, which engineers totally understand, and lawyers eventually wrap their heads around. But you do have to blend in that human aspect of it as well. So it's just you know, you eventually, when you get through it all, you start to go, hey, it all kind of makes sense together. You can't really look at one thing in isolation. But construction law just brings together a lot of those necessary skills that we're learning throughout the rest of the degree. And dog's doing something weird, sorry. And it puts it into practical context.
The ADR that you did, Anthony, was that the subject one, or I know there's one that you can do, because there's one you can take.
Yes, mediation processes and skills. So that That
I think
That's when you get
satisfies.
certified, is that right?
Yeah, so I think so the name is different depending on whether it's the LLB or the JD course.
Oh,
So the
right.
JD course, the name is Accredited General Mediation, whereas Anthony, what did you say? What was the name of the course?
Mediation processes of the field.
Right.
In any case, it's the formative training you need to then sit your assessment to become a national mediation accreditation system accredited mediator, which that thing, oh, it's right there.
That was a question on the
National.
quiz.
That's the one I got wrong. National mediation accreditation. Oh, yeah, I've got a thing that says I'm accredited. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, Matthew?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, Anthony is very humble when he says that, you know, he had an advantage. I mean, I think that the best part about the construction law course was being able to collaborate in the course with people like Anthony. And also there was another person in the course that I had a wonderful time discussing a fencing dispute that he had with his neighbor. And as you probably know, fencing disputes are one of the most common disputes, you know, ever in all of Australia. Fencing disputes is like the #1 dispute everywhere.
Crazy.
Yeah, I think there needs to be local council saying there needs to be 2 fences along every property boundary. Just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Everybody pay their own money.
So was there a group assignment in it? In construction law? No.
No, but it was, I think that, so this is one of the few law courses that non-law students could enroll in.
Ah, I see.
And so I think there were a couple of engineering students. I'm not really, I don't remember, I remember the breakdown, but it was more of the way the course is structured was more of let's have a group discussion. Let's have this thing where you can meet a barrister and just have a chat. And so it was more collaborative in that way, because that's how you're going to work in the construction industry. You're going to have to talk to a lot of people, and you know, that is really part of the whole industry. You need to be able to relate to environmental concerns or procurement or, you know, et cetera. And so that was really, I think, one of the big points of the course, but really an unspoken part of the course. I thought that could have been more highlighted more in this is the course where you will be able to collaborate with your other students, because not a lot of courses you can do that.
No, and so you have guest lecturers, would you? Like a barrister, for example.
Yeah, like special
we
sessions.
visited
Yes.
chambers.
Oh, true. Okay. Yeah. And were many people engaging? Were many students engaging, or was it just the same people all the time?
It's a bit of everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody has an anecdote to share related to building or construction, so it's pretty easy. And I probably hijacked a few too many lectures by gossiping about projects that Juliet had some involvement on, and I maybe was working with one of the contractors who was involved with it at the time. But it's just one of those things, you know. Yeah. Hey, remember when such and such stuff that up? Yeah, look, that's the construction industry, though. Look, it's a huge industry. I think it's saw something the other day that it contributes about 8% to Australia's GDP. It's a huge industry, but it's also a small industry. You know, it's like Toowoomba. Toowoomba's a big place, but it's a small place.
Yes.
It's easy to build networks. It's easy to build a good reputation. It's easy to burn a reputation as well, but it's one of those things that's quite open and welcoming and easily accessible as well. because it's such a big industry, there's a lot of, as I said earlier, there's a lot of need for good people generally. You don't need to be an engineer, you don't need to be a skilled labourer. You can find a place. There's many roles even for people with very little experience. If you've got a law degree, that speaks volumes. You could get a junior level role in contract administration, for example, or in commercial generally. And you can find people to learn from very readily. It's a huge industry with a lot of really good people. So even as an alternative to being a lawyer, a conventional lawyer, there's plenty of opportunities there. So if you're not sure about being a lawyer, have a look at doing something in construction.
And I think that's where it's important to, I always talk about the networking thing. You've got to put yourself out there, and as you did with Piper Alderman, just say, do you have something I can do? I just want to learn. It's just, I think things just don't get handed to you. You've got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, and look, it's admittedly, it's probably a little bit easier having been around for a while, and having spent 20 years of having to not be afraid to go and say hello to somebody, because career is dependent on it. But even if you're fresh out of uni, there's no harm in just putting your hand up and having a crack. So, all you can do is ask.
Yeah, the other suggestion I have, and this is particularly good for students. It's a bit expensive, but you can get a student membership in the Society of Construction Law Australia. I think it's something like $75 for a year. It's a bit steep for students, but the type of networks you get through that. Oh wow, you went to the national? Yeah, that was last week.
Yeah.
So
I was in Hobart for the conference.
So I think it was only $200 for students, whereas if you went as a full member, it's like $1,000. But anyway, I digress. But what they have this mentor program where they set you up. You say, oh, I would like to get a solicitor for a mentor, or a engineer for a mentor, and those people can open doors for you. And you might not necessarily call up somebody at Piper Alderman directly, but you might know someone who knows that person who can give you an introduction, and that's really opening doors. And that I would suggest, if anyone's interested in that, that's a good way, because people are always willing to sit down and have a coffee and talk about what they do, and that's a way to find out.
Funnily enough, I'm in that program, but not as a mentor, as a mentee. Because I thought it would just be interesting to find other people who've already gone through, they've been in the industry, and in the construction industry in particular, with law. So yes, I've been partnered up with somebody I already knew. But that's okay, because he's a good guy, and we went and had a coffee the other day and started talking about what I actually want to do with it. So he's given me some ideas and point me in the right direction. Yeah, as Matthew says, I highly recommend any of those specialist, law societies. By all means, I think you should get involved. They're good advocates.
That's a great tip. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Anthony. I know it's been a very intimate chat, but I'm sure everyone will appreciate it who listened to the recording. And good luck for the rest of the semester.
Yes, thanks to you too, to you both.
Thank you. Anything else you wanted to add before we finish? Or
No, just appreciate the opportunity to have a chat.
No, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matthew, for all your hard work. Keep it up.
And Matthew is the one who suggested we have this chat, so I'm grateful to Matthew as well. Thank you, Matthew. It's been very interesting. Construction law is something I would never have thought about, but when you said just now that you don't even have to be an engineer to find a place in construction. That's really exciting, because you don't think, you know, that's a whole other world that opens up to you then, isn't it? I think you're on mute. Thank you.
The plane going over. Sorry.
Oh, right. Thanks.
Yeah, look, it's very welcome. It's a welcoming industry for anybody who wants to give it a go.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
The recording now.